Hickey, or Dr. H, as many of my students refer to me. I want to welcome you to another episode of the International Service Learning Experiential Medical Education podcast. During each episode, I will be interviewing healthcare-focused students and faculty from high school to university that have had an opportunity to participate in an international service learning trip. Additionally, I will be discussing the benefits and challenges to international service with healthcare professionals that have served abroad, as well as industry leaders in healthcare, education, study abroad, spirituality, and those living in the countries being served. Good. Well, good morning. I'm very excited today to have Anna as my guest. And this is kind of an unusual podcast. And excuse me, in that Anna and I haven't met until just now. I actually reached out on LinkedIn probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. And I was interested just to find out if anyone had done medical mission trips. So I just kind of Googled or messaged medical mission trips, and up popped 2 or 3 names. And I read Anna's story, and I was kind of intrigued, and as a stranger I just reached out to her and told her who I was and about my podcast, and she was very excited to jump on board and join us today. So Anna, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I'm honored to be here, and I'm so excited to be a part of this, and I'm so happy that you reached out. So thank you for that. So a little bit about me. I am actually in medical sales. So I'm a territory representative for a company called Caldera Medical. It's a female pelvic reconstruction company. And I've always had just such a passion to serve. And that's why, I started getting into, well, this was my first medical mission trip, but that's kind of how I got started doing that. But with this company, they actually sponsor a bunch of humanitarian projects. And so I've been working with them for, I want to say I'm coming up on a year now with this company. So I do that. And then I also work for the St. Louis Cardinals doing like fan engagement, Team Fredbird. And yeah, that's a little bit of my background. I studied biology and neuroscience in college. I did publish some research in college. I was kind of on the pre-med track, and then I ended up switching routes and getting into medical sales, and it's been great ever since.
Well, Anna, just on the topic of medical sales rep, that's an interesting field. As you know, I've shared with you, I'm nursing faculty. This is actually my 50-year anniversary of becoming a nurse. So I've worked with all sorts of people in the healthcare industry, and I've worked a lot with medical sales representatives. A lot of our students in college really don't know much about that field. Can you just expand a little bit before we go into your service learning trip? Can you just expand a little bit on what does it take to become a medical sales rep, and what are the opportunities, and how does one prepare themselves for that field?
Absolutely. I actually didn't even know that it was an industry that I could get into either. So before this, as I was saying, I was pre-med, and I was actually, my story is I was in the OR shadowing a doctor to get my shadowing hours in. And there was a medical sales rep in the OR with the surgeon talking to the surgeon. And I was like, this isn't another doctor. Who is this guy? Got to talking with him, found out that he did medical sales, which is exactly what it sounds like, selling medical equipment. And there's so many avenues, right? A lot of people have heard of pharmaceutical sales. There's durable medical equipment. There's so many avenues that you can go down with medical sales, but that's just the bigger picture there. But I ended up talking to him and found out that it's an extremely competitive industry to get into, but a very rewarding industry because, you're still getting to help all of these patients and work, one-on-one with these surgeons and obviously with the medical teams that are in the OR. So it felt like kind of a good, like the best of both worlds, right? I was able to kind of use my background, studying biology and neuroscience, but also use my personality and still help others. So he said it was a very competitive industry. As far as getting into medical sales, everyone kind of has their own way to what they call break in. But for me, I networked a lot and I reached out to a lot of medical reps. I asked to shadow them. I already had some shadowing experience. I had a little bit of sales experience. And I prepared my resume. I prepared for interviews. I studied the surgeries and I studied the anatomy. And it's usually a lengthy process. But then once you're in, then you, right, are selling equipment to surgeons, to big hospital corporations, GPOs, all of that. And it's to, again, help the patient in any way possible. So that's kind of like an overview,
Mhm.
but it can kind of get like I guess a rep for itself.
I appreciate you sharing that. And in another life, I worked as an operating room educator where I was the person that dealt with the medical sales representatives in the operating room setting. So I got
Yes.
to know a lot about medical sales. And as you said, you studied, you prepared. I was always so impressed with medical sales representatives because their knowledge, the depth of their knowledge was huge. I mean, if you're selling for your company, Caldera Medical, if you're selling, women's products, you've got to know the
Right.
anatomy. You've got to be able to go head to head with the surgeon, talk to the staff. That's huge
Yes.
that you're able to learn that
Absolutely.
information. And I'm sure if you don't know what you're speaking about, the surgeons or the staff can see through you. So it does take a lot on your
For
end
sure.
to make sure that you can chat with them. While we're talking about the medical sales field, tell us a little bit about Caldera. I'm blown away by their humanitarian program and what they've done for women worldwide. If you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about your product line.
Yeah, absolutely. So Caldera was established in 2002, and they strictly specialize in female pelvic reconstruction and female pelvic health. And so what I sell is stress urinary incontinence slings and then sacrocolpopexy mesh for prolapse in women. And what really actually drew me to the company was their humanitarian efforts, because a lot of these bigger corporations, these bigger companies, that's not something that they push, or it's not something that is shown on their websites. But Caldera's, they really highlighted that on their website, and to their customers and to their surgeons, that they sponsor humanitarian trips. So the our company then will provide product for surgeons going on these trips to, then have the product there for the patients and for the procedures. And it's strictly the female pelvic products that we sponsor, because that's what we have. That's our portfolio. And we're continuing to expand. I know Caldera actually just recently acquired Johnson and Johnson's Gynacare TVT line, which is like the original, stress urinary incontinence sling. But what's even crazier to me too is that, speaking about Caldera and like what we sell, is like 1 in 3 women develop stress urinary incontinence, which is just crazy, right? A lot of women are affected by this. And it's something that, as a woman myself, I felt like I wasn't even taught that much about.
Right.
And so many of these, of women in these, lower income countries and are struggling with this, right? And there's no way, and it just affects the quality of life for them, right? And so being able to support that and these procedures down in other countries where women aren't getting this help, it's just it's crazy. Yeah, mind blowing. And I love that my company is able to do that and sponsor those trips and the products.
Well, it's
Yeah.
it's kind of excuse me, interesting and exciting that I met you when I did because right now with my role with International Service Learning, the company that I've used for 15 years of service learning medical mission trips. Right now, we've created a team and they're in Belize right now. They just arrived on Saturday, and it's an
Yeah.
all women's healthcare team that I put together. And the
Yeah.
reason I put that team together was from my 15 plus years of doing service learning medical mission trips, I've seen way too many women suffering in silence. I've seen way too
Hmm.
many women that have gynecological issues, breast lumps, etc., that maybe are intimidated by male surgeons or male docs. So what we've got
Right.
going on right now is an all-women healthcare team and an all-women healthcare team, which is the doctors, the translators, etc., with
Yeah.
hopes that more women will come to our clinics because they do walk around with a lot of pain, with a lot of symptomology, and they're not getting treated.
Yes.
So kudos to
Right.
Caldera for what they do. And just looking, you mentioned their website.
Yeah.
That's what got me really excited about them. They're partnering with over 600 surgeons globally. They've already helped 480,000 women to receive
Yeah.
life-changing treatments with a goal of treating 1 million women in underserved populations by 2027. That's huge.
Incredible.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, kudos to your company and for you for doing your research and what you're doing.
Yeah,
So let's talk about your service learning trip. Tell us about where you
absolutely.
went and when that was.
Yeah, so I went February 7th through the 14th, and we went to Colon in Honduras. I know my accent probably isn't great pronouncing that, but
No worries.
so we went to Honduras, and it was February 7th through the 14th, and it was a medical mission trip. It was faith-based, and it was a mission team based out of I would Middle Illinois, like kind of rural Illinois area. It's Ion Missions is who I went with. And I actually found out about this trip through one of the surgeons that I worked with closely that used our products in Caldera. And I was actually, when I had found out, it was almost a year ago now when I found out about the trip. I was meeting with the surgeon. I was newer to the company. I knew that he had done humanitarian trips and I knew that he used our products. So I went to go meet with him and sit down for lunch and expressed my interest in humanitarian projects and a medical mission trip. And he was like, "Well, your company, sponsors the slings to go down there and for me to do those procedures and I go with this team every year and it was the Ion Missions team." And so that's kind of how I even got to learning about it or hearing about the trip. And so, yes, we went down there with a team of probably around 30 people. We had a head team, and then we had like a behind team. So the head team was full of just the doctors and the, surgeons that had gone multiple times. And then we had a team of like other individuals who went after. So about, I want to say 18 of us that went after. And so, yeah, I'm trying to think of.
Was the team industry sponsored? Was it sponsored by Caldera then?
So it wasn't, but Caldera sponsored like the product
Okay.
for the surgeon to use because we just had I think we had two surgeons in the hospital. They actually didn't place me in the hospital for this trip, so I was actually working in the pharmacy, which was a little bit different, which I can talk about in a little bit too. But so we had a general surgeon and then we had OB-GYN, and
Mhm.
so he was doing the procedures that he would do here, which was gynecological procedures
Right.
that required the slings. So,
Tell us
yes.
about
And
your
he did
work.
a,
Well, I was going to say, sorry. Tell us about your work in the pharmacy. So you
yeah,
were
yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah.
trip, but they placed you where the need was. Is that how that worked?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And this trip, it was a medical mission trip and it was medical based, but we also had teams that were, kind of all over the place. We had a couple people that were working like in the special needs school, a couple people that were working in a feeding center. And so what we did actually, so we were in this little village La Sabita in Honduras, and we turned a church into a clinic. And so we spent the first whole day, right, turning this church into a clinic where we had several different setups with several different physicians and providers. Like ophthalmology was there, we had women's health that was there, and then primary care. And so and then we had the pharmacy. And so the pharmacy is it was a lot of work
Mhm.
because we have to set up everything and then try to be as organized as possible. And I'll kind of run you through too like what this looked like and what every day was kind of looking
Sure,
like. We were
sure.
seeing 200 plus patients,
Wow.
some days more than others and some days we were only seeing about 100, but that's a lot in
That's a
one
lot.
day. And so we would show up to the village and we'd show up to the clinic and you would see all the patients outside waiting in line, and we had iPads, and so they would check the patients in, they would take a picture, check the patients in, the patients would then go see the physicians or the providers, and then we would get the prescription sent to our iPad in the pharmacy, which was another section of the clinic. And then there was, I want to say, four of us on a team, four to five of us on a team in the pharmacy. And then once we would get the prescription, we would go and fill the prescription with all of the medications that we had. And it was like just a working train, kind
Mm.
of like
Wow.
constantly going, going, going. We were getting just patient after patient after patient and filling the prescriptions and making sure that they had the right dosage and whether if it was kids or adults. And so I was just on my feet, go, go, go all day, labeling, again, just trying to be as efficient as possible, as organized as possible, And so it did. It took a lot of teamwork, but it was again so rewarding to know that we were helping so many people and helping this community. So it was just so fantastic. But the pharmacy was great.
Now, were you able to get in to see any of the surgeries while you were there?
Yes. So
You
I
did.
actually did take, yeah. I took a surgery day with the surgeon, Dr. Rominger, that I have worked with here. And so I actually like took the whole, I want to say like first half of the day to spend with him. And so we arrived to the hospital and we did, I want to say 3 cases. We did 2 sling procedures and then anterior, posterior vaginal repair. And so that was an incredible experience just to see like the medical setup in Honduras
Hmm.
versus what we have here in America is just totally different.
Isn't it amazing
So that
seeing the
was
differences? And that was a question you kind of laid into one of my questions. What were the differences in
yeah.
healthcare that you saw in Honduras as compared to the United States?
Yeah. Well, they have wonderful teams there and very passionate nurses and very passionate doctors, but I would say the biggest difference is the actual like setup of healthcare, right? It's just not as, and to put this into simplest terms, not as fancy as what we see here in the
Correct.
States.
Correct.
Yeah, so the hospital was very run down
Hmm.
in the nicest way possible, and it just was very, very, very outdated. But something that I saw that was a little bit different was a lot of passion, right?
Hmm.
These nurses were very, very passionate about their patients. Was the setup great? No, but you could tell that everyone was like very efficient with it. But there was only 2 ORs in this entire hospital, which also was so different. So it's just very tight corners, and like in the States, a lot of these big hospitals will have several OR rooms and several different specialties like designated to certain
Right.
areas, right? Like, okay, this is just urology, this is just ortho. Here this hospital had 2 ORs, and when I had walked in, there was a little boy who had completely broken his femur in half, and
Mm.
he had to then take one of the OR rooms that we were going to use.
Right.
But it was just so, it was a little chaotic and again, a lot more outdated, but very passionate, if that made
And
any
that
sense.
does make sense, and that's something I share with my students before we go on our trips is the level of passion that they'll see, and I try to
Mhm.
prepare them for what you just shared also, that they do as best as they can with what they've got, and
Exactly.
it is kind of a culture shock when you do go to some of these underserved countries, and I was in
Right.
Belize just a few weeks ago, and in a similar hospital as to what you describe, and only a few operating rooms, and again, they do as
Right.
best they can. But yes, the passion does stand out with the whole healthcare team. I mean, you mentioned the nurses, but the physicians also, and all the other
Right.
people. We did chat, even though we just met face to face for the first time today. We did chat by phone a week or so ago. At which point, I asked you as a medical sales rep, do you have training to be in the operating room? And but you had alluded just now that you did some shadowing when you were on your pre-med track. But
Yes.
in the healthcare industry, do medical sales reps, are they prepared for the operating room scenario? Because, I've been a perioperative nurse for 15,
Yeah.
20 years, and I'm always so wary of people in my operating room. The concern is contaminating the back table or contaminating some of our sterile supplies.
Yes.
So how well are you prepared as a medical sales rep to step into a sterile environment?
Very well prepared. We are very well trained. There's a lot of in-depth training too. We take a lot of courses and online courses that help prepare us for that. And then obviously we go and train and do field rides with our managers and with other people that are in the field to get us as prepared as possible for being in the OR setting. And the OR setting is there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people. There's obviously a patient on the table. There's the sterile area. So as a medical rep, I am when you're first going in there of least importance, right? I know my place. I stay far away from the sterile field. I'm usually back by one of the head nurses. We're never scrubbed in ever. And then whenever the surgeon goes to use our product, if they've got question or if there's ways that I can bring value or support them, right? That's when I can use my voice and speak up. Other than that, I stay out of the way. And that's something that and again, this is different for all specialties of medical sales reps because there's some medical sales reps that are more engaged in the surgery if the surgeon's using a lot of their products at one time or if
Right.
they're doing something with like a screen. But like for me, I'm most of the time out of the way. And being prepared for the sterile field is just always staying as far as possible. And again, just knowing your place in the OR. But they do prepare us very well for that. And again, whether that's with the field rides or with doing a lot of online courses to
And
just,
going back to your trip, what was the most surprising thing that you encountered and what was most challenging about the trip?
yeah, most surprising was probably, and I mean this in the best way, the culture shock. I wasn't prepared, and I think that it's just not the same in the States. And what I mean by that is like they're very family oriented, and everyone there is almost like they're showing up for one another. And I feel like we lack that so much in the United States is that sense of community and coming together. And actually, it was like the minute I walked into the airport, there was just like hundreds of people waiting for like family members to like come, off the planes, and there was like balloons and signs and I was just like so overwhelmed with the amount of like love and support from, you know, these people, and it was just incredible. And that was honestly the most surprising thing is everyone showing up for one another. And they had like whenever we were eating lunches, everyone just made lunches for one another, and just leaning on family and leaning on community is something that I just don't see enough of in the States.
Well, and this is the reason why I put this podcast together is just to hear this passion that you're sharing
Yeah.
with us because I know this is an audio podcast, but I'm smiling from ear to ear because I've been there, done that, and I totally understand what you're saying, and it's just amazing to see how important family is. Not that our families aren't important here in the United States, but it's in a
Right.
different way. The level of support is amazing. When we do our home visits, when we go to these countries, they may
Yes.
only have one loaf of bread and they offer you the bread. They may only have one chair, they
Yes.
offer you that chair. It's amazing to see and I can see the scenarios that you're describing in my mind, and that's why I'm smiling so much. What was the most
Yes.
challenging aspect of your trip?
The most challenging was how hard it was on my heart, to see some of the living conditions. And again, to see how kind and how loving everyone was, and the fact that I felt like I just wanted to give more and I
Mm.
didn't know how to do that. And honestly reflecting every night, and obviously the days were very long and we were very tired and waking up early, and that's challenging on your body alone. But mentally, it was challenging. Mentally, seeing that and wishing that I could give more is what I felt like was some of the most challenging things.
It's a challenge that I try to prepare my students for, and it's very hard to prepare for something like that. But it is life changing. I mean, when you see that, you can't
Yeah.
forget the lessons that you learned. And I always tell my students, we're going to learn a lot from the people that we encounter in these countries. And my students kind of look at me like, how can we learn something from them? And I'll say, you'll see. And
Right.
you're a perfect example of what you learned. You learned about their compassion. You learned how family's so important, and it sticks
Right.
with you. What was language an issue because you were in Honduras? Did you have interpreters, or were you able to speak some
Yeah.
Spanish, or how did that work?
We did have interpreters, which was so nice. I actually, in my educational career, I took Spanish, growing up, but I would say my Spanish is very basic. I definitely needed to study up a little bit more. And I know now for next year or the next trip that I go on, if it's sooner than later, that I will have better Spanish. I'm going to start taking, some more Spanish classes. But with us having interpreters, that helped tremendously. And a lot of our interpreters too had some medical background, which was really nice.
Now, you mentioned the healthcare team. It was a pretty symbiotic relationship with the surgeons and the staff.
Yeah.
Um, were you made to feel a part of the team? I mean, you're able to I mean, obviously working in the pharmacy, you're a part of the team. Did you feel like it was everybody working very well together, or did you feel because you were from America that you were an outsider and you weren't pulled in?
No, we worked so well together. It was like, speaking about family, it felt like we were just all one big family. Like no one sat down. We were all there to help one another. But I actually made a really good friend. So working in the pharmacy, there was another young person that was, because I was actually one of the youngest on the trip. So I'm 23. And so there was actually a lot of more older adults that were with us. But his name was Jose, and he was actually from that what's the word that I'm looking for, from that village, but now he does professional soccer for Honduras.
Oh,
And
wow.
he came back. He took his PTO to come back and help serve for the week that we came down for the medical mission trip. And so he was working in the pharmacy with me, and we actually became really good friends, even though we had such a language barrier. We were like
Hmm.
using Google Translate, but it just felt like we worked so well together, and we got to a point to where everyone kind of knew what their role was,
Right.
and it just was so fluid whether we were speaking the same language or not.
Was there, in addition to this gentleman, was there anyone, a patient or other community member that made a difference that tugged on your heartstrings a little?
Yeah, they all did, but there was actually one little girl in particular. So they had like a vacation Bible school for some of the kids during the day, and while their, parents were at the clinics and stuff. And my mission leader, Mike, had asked, "Hey, do you want to step over here? Like, just take a break from the pharmacy for a little bit because it was long hours." And there was a little girl who had an eye infection, and so her mother couldn't make it up to the clinic, so we got her some prescription eye medication drops, and we were going to take her back to her house and then show the mother how to use them. And when I met this little girl, I just felt like such a connection to her. She was so sweet. She was 5 years old, very quiet. You could tell the language barrier was hard for her. And she had asked if she could hold my hand, and I held her hand and we walked to her home. And to see her living conditions was something that I had never seen before in my entire life. And it's something that I was not prepared for.
Mhm.
And although I had seen a lot of the village, this part of the village I had not seen. And I had, again, it was just something that I had never been exposed to. And this sweet little girl, to see her mother and her little sister who was there, that it just was something I can't even describe. And I felt so connected because the mother looked even a little bit younger than me, and she was expecting another child. And then this little girl also had a sister that was there. And whenever, we showed the mother how to use the eye drops, and whenever we were leaving, I took the little girl back to Vacation Bible School, and she gave me a hug, and
Mhm.
she just didn't want to let go,
Mhm.
you know? And oh my gosh, it was so emotional.
I'm sure you didn't want to let go either.
No, I didn't. And I wish that I
Yeah.
could just show it to you through my eyes and through my experience. It's so hard to explain, just vocally, but it was it just like changed my life, and that little girl changed my life.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and
Yeah.
it kind of brings up, excuse me, a story I always tease my students about is that before we leave the country, I'm going to check their bags and make sure they're not bringing any little kids back with them
Yeah.
because typically we do meet young children like that, and the connection we
Yeah.
make with them is just unbelievable. Every one of my students to a T can tell you about a Susie or a Jose or whatever,
Hmm.
that they've met along the way that really tugs on their heartstrings. And it is amazing when you get outside the clinic scenario, and we typically will use a church or a school setting like what you shared. When you
Yeah.
go into their homes, as we do on our trips, and it's just humbling to see the basic amenities that they have. It
Right.
makes you want to come back. In my case, teaching at the University of South Carolina, I would go year after year after year, and different students had gone 4 years in a row with me during their undergrad experience, only because
Yeah.
they didn't complete what they started,
Right.
and that's the beauty of service learning trips, whether it's faith-based or medically themed. The opportunity to go into an underserved area and make a difference in their life is just huge.
Right. There's nothing that compares for sure.
Speaking of that, I mean, obviously you're pretty emotional talking about that situation. How did you deal with your emotions when you returned home? How was it readjusting back to life when you went into her home and you saw the conditions and you come back to our lifestyle?
Right. It felt like another culture shock because you're there for over a week and then you come back and you're like, "Oh my goodness." But it really motivated me to want to inspire others, just like, what you're doing. It really, yeah, all I want to do is continue to inspire others to take that chance to go out and do this and help other people. It just gave me such a different perspective on life. And it's what you said. It's like everyone says, "Oh, you're going to be changed. Oh, this is try to prepare yourself for this," but you truly don't understand it until you go on the trip. And then it is. And then you're like, wow, this is what they meant.
Well, the
And,
passion that
and
you're
com-
sharing is exactly what we need to hear, and that's what other people will
yeah,
hear. And you probably don't know it right now, but you're role modeling, and I'm hopeful there's people that are listening to us that say,
yeah,
I want that passion. I haven't felt that before. I want what Anna
right.
has, and maybe I need to get out of my comfort zone, and maybe I need to look up a faith-based trip or a medical mission trip. Maybe I need to do that. And it is huge
Yes,
once you make that leap. And yes, you are forever changed. And it is hard for people to
right.
understand that. And that's why we set this podcast up, is to hear that passion.
Yeah,
Because
is
you
to
can
hear that.
well, you can see a picture on Instagram, you can see a little reel or a picture on Facebook of somebody holding a little child, and it does look nice and is very inspiring, but you don't hear what you're sharing. And that's why I wanted to
Yes.
do this, so other people would hear that passion. How's this trip change your perspective on healthcare here in the United States? I mean, you saw some of the conditions where you were and how they do as best they can with what they have. But how's that made
Yeah.
you look at our healthcare system differently?
It definitely, one, it makes I feel blessed, right? I feel lucky to be where I'm at and to have access to our healthcare system. However, I feel like we could be doing more. And I feel like there's so many, again, so much more opportunity to give back. And I feel like our healthcare systems could maybe be giving back a little bit more, or we could have more surgeons doing trips like this, or more people in the medical field doing trips like this, whether it's nurses or medical device reps or surgeons or scrub techs. Like I think we could be doing more. And that's another reason that I wanted to do a podcast like this with you, is because I want to inspire others to again get out of their comfort zones and do something like this,
How
because
how
I
could we
feel
do
like,
that, Anna? How could we do more? Just out of curiosity, what's your ideas or your vision?
you know, I've been reflecting on that a lot lately. And I've actually met with some surgeons in the St. Louis area about asking what is it that we could be doing more, not even just in other countries, but in our community.
Right.
And I hear different opinions from everyone because it's hard, because we in America, there's insurance and there's so many other factors. So I don't really know what that looks like yet, but I have been brainstorming on how we could be doing more and impacting even just the communities where we're at in healthcare, because there's also a lot of underprivileged people here as
Oh, for
well
sure.
that we could be impacting, right?
Well, the good thing is
Um,
you're asking the question. The good thing is you're stirring things up a little bit when people haven't
yeah,
had that question asked before. And you're right. We have a lot of underserved in our backyard, so to speak. We don't have to go internationally. And a lot of people give me a hard time saying, why do I do so much international work? And when there's so much need here. And I agree, there is a lot of need here, but there's so few of us that want to go internationally
international,
to
agreed,
provide help, because it is getting more out of your comfort zone to a country where it's a different language, a different
for
culture.
sure.
It's more expensive for us to do what we're doing. But yes, you're right. I mean, you can look look into our own communities and start to work with underserved populations, some of which are from the countries that you're serving in. I mean, we have a lot of people from
Exactly.
Honduras, from
Yeah.
Guatemala, from Nicaragua that are in our cities that
Yes.
may not be able to access our own healthcare system.
Right. Right. But like you said, I think serving out of the country, it really it allows you to get out of your comfort zone and become better. And so I wish that more people would have the opportunity to do that or were willing to do that. And so I think that we have a lot of healthcare individuals that could have the ability to take that leap and just maybe don't want to. And
I think
so,
Anna, you've got a really excuse me, good opportunity as a medical sales representative to work within your company and to inspire other representatives like yourself, or to even develop better or more programming to allow them to go to underserved areas. And the more people that go, the more people that see what you've seen. And
yes.
obviously, your company has seen that because of their humanitarian work. Maybe more medical sales reps, or if you go to conferences, or I would even encourage you, and I don't know if you have that opportunity, to go to conferences and speak openly about your experience. And by doing that,
Yeah.
more people hear it. I mean, I'm speaking at the
Yes.
National Student Nursing Association annual convention next month in Houston. So there'll be a large
Yeah.
audience of not only student nurses, but faculty who maybe have never done what I've done and are going to hear about it. And they're going to hear my passion, just what you're sharing. And I'm hoping I'm planting a seed with them
Yes.
to say, here's something you can do. Here's an opportunity. So in your case, with medical sales reps, I don't know if there are conferences or other venues, but with what you're sharing with me, that passion, I could see that that would go a long way to inspire other people. And again, hopefully a lot of people will hear this podcast and also be inspired.
For sure. For sure. Absolutely.
What for industry representatives like yourself that are considering a similar trip, what advice would you give to them as far as how would they prepare for the trip?
I think that's a great question. I think some of the best advice that I was given was just to have an open mind and an open heart. And, as sales reps, which I kind of I always hate calling myself a sales rep, but I think there's some reps that can be a little uptight and they're in work doing stuff for a reason. But when you go on these sort of trips, you're putting that aside, right? And you're there to serve and you're there to bring value to these people and to the community. And so the best advice I would give is to go in with an open heart and an open mind and that just will to serve, right?
Mhm.
And to be there and to help others. And that's how I would prepare. And I really, really tried this first trip to do that. And I feel like it went super well. And I was, again, they were like, let's go put you in the pharmacy. And I was like, wherever you guys need me is where I will be. And if that's, not in the OR, then that's not in the OR. I'll be where I am of, you know, the most value. So
And I appreciate you sharing that you'll fill a need wherever they need you. That's great.
yes.
And you mentioned first trip. Are you alluding that this may be the beginning of something?
Oh, 100%. I plan to continue to go back every year and if not multiple times a year to different places and with different groups. And I'm always open to what more I can do. And I it's so funny because some of my friends and family had asked, why do you do this? And I say, I have one life and so do these individuals.
Yeah.
And if I can change someone's life, even if it's just one person, then I want to do it. And if it's just 1% better that I can make the world, then I want to make the world 1% better. And so I hope that I continue to just do that and to inspire others and to continue to provide my support.
Well, we need more Annas in our life. I love your
Thank
passion
you.
for wanting
Thank you.
for wanting to make such a difference in people's lives, and
Thank
we're
you.
on the same wavelength. I feel passion trumps everything, and for 15 plus years I've led service learning medical mission trips, and most of my students have never been out of the country, have never spoken another language, have never encountered another culture, and they're scared. but they
Yeah.
hear my passion for making a difference, and they go willingly, and they come back and they're transformed, and they're just like you, and then they go on, they inspire more people. So again,
Right.
we need more Annas in our life that have had this experience and are paying it forward. And that's what the world's all about. As you said, we've
It
only got
is.
one life to live. It's a short one. Why not do
Yep.
as much as you can in the short time you're here? And if
Exactly.
it's getting out of your comfort zone and traveling to another country and making a difference, even if it's just one person's life. And I don't know if you listened to my podcast this past week, but it was a dental student from the University of South Carolina, and she was so cute. She said, if I can make one of my patients smile when they leave the dental clinic, then I know I've made a difference.
Yeah.
And I
I
thought
love that.
that's all it takes,
It's all it
and
takes.
that experience that you had, that that impression and memory you have with that little girl, she probably has the same memory of you holding her hand and
Yeah.
reliving that hug many, many times over. So
Right.
it doesn't take a lot to extend ourselves, and I really appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything else you want to
Absolutely.
share with us, Anna, from your experience in the country that you traveled to, and what other recommendations would you give for people that are considering doing something what you did?
Yeah, I have such a respect for that country, for Honduras. I have such a respect for the people and for the culture. And I just want, to remind everybody that this is one world. And again, like what I said earlier, is we have one life.
Mhm.
And so why not use that for good and to impact others and to just, again, make the world a better place. And so that's all I want to do.
Well, kudos to you, Anna, for sharing initially, and this is how we met on LinkedIn, that
Yeah.
you shared your story on LinkedIn, and you had a lot of people, congratulating you for getting out of your comfort zone and doing what you did. I mean, I heard your voice, that connected us. A
Yeah.
lot of people are going to hear your voice and hear this podcast, and that's how it works. So I commend you for what you did. I commend your company, Calderis, for their humanitarian efforts, and I guess I challenge other companies that don't have the humanitarian efforts like what your company does to step up and
Yes.
make a difference and help other people. And I'm hopeful that you'll be able to continue your service learning trips. Know that there's other venues. International Service Learning is the one that I work for. It's but one of many. We've been doing what we've done for 30 plus years, and our
Right.
trips are very similar to what you described, where you're working in the community and you work in a variety of settings. And there's just a great number of people doing what we do, like what you've experienced, but there's not enough.
Right.
So I think it's going to be through the inspiration of people like yourselves and others that are going to inspire people to want to step up to the plate. So thank you
Absolutely.
for your efforts, Anna. It's been a true joy to hear your message, and I wish you the best as you continue with your humanitarian efforts.
Thank you. It's been an honor talking with you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I want to sincerely thank our guest, Anna, for her willingness to join us today on the International Service Learning Experiential Medical Education podcast. But most importantly, I want to thank Anna for the passion that she has shared with us today. After interviewing Anna, I have no doubts that she will continue to make a huge difference in the lives of others, as she has a great opportunity to inspire other medical sales representatives to do as she has done. And as she shared, this was the first of what may be more service learning medical mission trips in the future.